You're listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Here we have the opportunity to listen to the stories that connect our musical family tree. First-hand accounts of performances, musicians, and mentors that shape the way we listen, learn, and teach. On today's episode, we are chatting with Hungarian pianist Zoltán Fejérvári. Zoltán is performing tomorrow for the Sanford Hill Piano Series in Bellingham. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
Can you tell us a little bit about your program that you'll be performing and how you selected the pieces?
Yes, tomorrow I will play Bach French Suite number 5 in G major. 2 weeks ago I've played a concert in the Liszt Academy in Budapest with all 6 French suites, and probably this is the most brilliant from all of the 6, although I love them all, but if I had to choose one, that would be the G major. And also because originally I was gonna play Ravel, Le Tombeau de Couperin, but unfortunately I had to change this in my program. Sometimes plans are
Not met.
not good. Sometimes plans are not good, and they are made too much in advance. And so if you make a program 2 years before the concerts, then your life might take another path during these years, and you will have to change something. So I'm playing a Beethoven Sonata, Opus 110 tomorrow, which is also not a bad piece, I guess. And we are in the anniversary year anyway, so I'm going to play a lot of Beethoven sonatas this year, and this is very close to my heart. This sonata 110, and I think it's a very nice ending of the first half. Also has some connection with Baroque music, because in the third movement, Beethoven uses different Baroque genres like recitativo, aria, and fugue. And from these 3 genres put together the final movement. So that will be the first half, and then in the second half I'm playing 24 preludes by Chopin.
Wow.
Which is also some sort of connection to Bach, because Bach was the example for Chopin when creating this piece. So 24 preludes in the 24 tonalities. So yeah, this is the program.
That's beautiful. So as you're planning programs, the Ravel's a perfect example. Do you have a basic idea of what you're going to do 1 or 2 years in advance, or is it maybe sometimes landmark concerts that you know you have to play something and you try and play it a few times before? Like, what's your kind of theory on assembling your programs?
Yeah, so I have both, or even more variations of how I put together programs. Well, since I'm still in the beginning, I would say, of my professional career in a way, I'm 33, but I think we can call it still the beginning. So, first of all, I'm not experienced enough how to handle this. Second of all, many places have their own ideas about programs,
right,
which you have to consider and somehow adjust your ideas. So, for example, here I knew that I was gonna play the 6 French suites by Bach a little bit before, which was a given program. I didn't choose that, but there was a series in Hungary where suites for cello and other partitas for violin. So I knew that I was gonna play this, so I tried to add at least some of the Bach suites to some other concerts.
Right.
And since Ravel is also a suite and a French suite,
right,
in G or in E minor, so it has also a tonality connection to the French suite, and also it somehow met the plan that I have been wanting to play more French music lately. that I combine these two things. But there are so many circumstances that another venue in the fall didn't accept this program suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first little which unbalanced this
Right.
whole structure.
Right.
Stuff happens. With Chopin is the same thing. I was avoiding Chopin in the last 5 years, and when I realized that there was no reason,
Right.
then I just started to play again. I had this funny preconception, I think, about Chopin that there isn't a chance to play it well.
Interesting. And yet everybody loves it when people play it.
And yet, so there was a wall between Chopin and me for
What
a
helped
while.
you get over it? What made you change your mind?
I think it just happened. I just realized that there was no wall anymore.
Yeah.
It's funny. You get older. You also, at least as I'm looking back, I think I have less and less preconceptions. I have less and less fears of things, maybe, and so somehow slowly finding my freedom, which helps me to forget about this how you have to play things and how you're not supposed to play things.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting perk to getting older is somehow you realize that there's fun in new things and learning, and that you don't have to.
Totally, and you also, because you are getting further from your study years.
Right. Right.
So you become your own teacher, and you just realize that the real studying has just started when you leave your school.
Yes.
With actually more responsibility for your own things, so nobody will tell you what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it very exciting and fascinating.
I'd love to talk a little bit going way back to when you were in school. You started very young. What got you into piano? Were your parents musicians?
They are musicians. Yeah, they're string players. They're string players, but musician families have piano at home usually.
Yes.
So we also did. Well, I had also a grandmother who was a piano teacher, and she had the grand piano. We only had an upright.
Mm-hmm.
But
was she your first
then
teacher?
She gave it to me when my piano learning got serious.
Mm-hmm.
We traded
our
instruments.
It's very nice, Grandma.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in other way, she was really strict. But otherwise, yes, so string players. My first official instrument was the violin, which lasted a month. I was 6 when I started learning the violin, and that by the time I could play the piano, I discovered that you can easily play harmonies, and it has a completeness, everything is so satisfying.
Exactly.
About the piano.
You get the whole piece.
Yeah, but then I started to study violin. It lasted a month because, as I remember, and as my parents tell me, I asked my teacher about week 6 or so that when the chords will come. So I need chords. It's fine, and I'm using my bow and how to keep the instrument, and how to hold it, and all this stuff. It's really difficult to start with a string instrument.
Absolutely.
It's not satisfying at all, and especially if you already reached a certain level at piano. So she told me the truth. That years.
Yeah.
And that was the last lesson.
Good thing she told you the truth.
That was the last lesson. And it took another 2 years and started officially started piano in school, but of course I was given a lot of scores by my father and my mother, so I sighted a lot even before my official studies, and it helped me extremely a lot in my future, because then I became a pretty good sight reader, and it's a really good thing that you can easily read music, and it gives you such a pleasure and facility to just, that you can access so many new music and orchestra music. And
did you find that you fell in love with it right away, or did you ever have a time where you were not wanting to practice and you needed to be pushed?
No, I didn't practice at all until I was 13 or 14 years old. But the sight reading helped me to survive. So that's why I could actually achieve a certain technique, and just so my piano playing improved by this. But the real work waited until I was 14, when I entered the conservatory, the Bartók Conservatory in Budapest. My new teacher discovered my little secret that I actually sight read in the lessons. So,
but that was riveting.
And then doesn't go anywhere. So, so she actually forbid the reading at all. I mean, but I played for her. I had to play by heart. There was no exception. So
that's cool. That's a neat way to get around it.
Yeah, so it was just very simple. From that on, I had to play by heart in a lesson, and from then on, actually, I took it so seriously that I never really used the score anymore in the lessons. Whoever I played for, I had it clear that the lesson is not about learning together, but more like I do some homework, and then I show my homework.
Exactly.
And then the teacher can react, but she or he cannot just practice instead of you. Well, it's also, especially if you're young, of course you practice together in the lesson, so you still have to learn how to practice, and the good teacher tells you how to do it, but it doesn't mean that you just come to the lesson totally unprepared.
Waiting for them to practice for you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Do you have some kind of moments or thoughts being suddenly in conservatory and you have all these colleagues and all these people who are serious? Do you remember performances you went to or concerts that you heard that was really inspiring to you that just continued to further your energy?
Totally. So it was a huge change in my life, because it's a musical high school, so everybody's a musician there, and you are with your musician colleagues 24 hours basically. Before in the primary school, I was sort of the stranger, the outsider a little bit. So what I was doing, I felt I had to hide it. It's not very public. It's something you even feel ashamed. But then when I found myself there in this conservatory with all this, not everybody, but a good percent of people took it really seriously and they became musicians, then it felt like a paradise, I have to say. So it was such a freedom suddenly, and so inspiring. Suddenly you can share all your thoughts and wow, you were understood by the others. That's amazing. So since this conservatory is the pre-college of the Liszt Academy, we had free access to go and listen to concerts in the Liszt Academy. So the students have their own balcony in the Liszt Academy. So we heard a lot of amazing concerts. Which comes to mind first, maybe the Andras Schiff series. He always would give a good 5 or 6 concerts per season, thematically. So, for example, there was one series on Chopin and on other composers whom Chopin loved. Bach, Scarlatti, and Mozart in the first half, and then Chopin pieces in the second half. Or the late Beethoven sonatas with late Haydn and late Schubert, or all the Beethoven sonatas. These concerts were always a big event, and it was really inspiring. Or for example, I remember one concert with the Mahler Chamber Orchestra and Claudia Abbado.
Mm-hmm.
That was maybe, if 5 concerts, that would be one of those 5 for sure. And they played the Mahler Symphony Number 9, and I remember that after the last notes, it's really just kind of a death at the end. There was a good 3 minutes of silence.
Wow!
Amazingly long. That felt like a never-ending. Totally crazy long. and I think it could have lasted longer if someone from the audience wouldn't have lost it.
Yeah, they're like, okay.
And just, they probably, this is a games of the nerves, so
yes.
It's just, but yeah, that can describe this concert. It was beyond any imagination.
Amazing.
So
that's one of my favorite questions. So I'd love to chat with you about that. There is something in the air. There's something magical that can happen. And the result can be moments like that, where after this incredible piece and this slow death that ends that movement and the heartbeat slows to nothing, and the result is a stunned audience, and it's the power is thick in the air, and no one can move, and no one's going to clap, and everyone's just going to sit. Have you had other experiences like that, or if you had the pleasure of performing in a concert chamber or solo where you could feel that power when it's happening and knew kind of in the back of your mind this is one of those special moments?
Yes, I'm sure I had this experience. I find it very important that the public, the audience, an active listener,
mm-hmm.
and you can definitely feel it from stage. If they are listening to your playing, or they are just sort of hearing it.
Right. Right.
There was a concert that I gave in New York City. The series called People's Symphony, and it's a very old series, and it's in a huge hall of a high school in New York City, in Manhattan, and the audience is so enthusiastic and waiting for the next show that they actually appear like an hour and a half before the concert.
Wow.
And they would take their places and just, starving for somebody to
come play.
And it was amazing. I had to stop my dress rehearsal because of that, because they were coming in.
Wow.
And it's like, 1,500 people. And I totally feel it during the concert that they they are just sort of, I don't know how to describe,
kind of like
but
if
they could, they would have come closer and just eat the music. And it makes concerts very exciting, but more intense, I find. And
yes,
and you need this excitement. I'm sure that since it's an event, it's a celebration or something, it should not be normal. It should not be just relaxed and So that's what makes a big difference between listening to music at home or on a device. I think live performances will never expire. They will always be very important, and they will always give more than even the most perfect recording.
Right.
because it has this extra energy.
Exactly. How do you work on managing that kind of intensity and energy with the nerves / get yourself into the headspace? Because it all kind of balls together. Do you
Yeah.
get really nervous, or can you get yourself in the zone quickly?
There was a time when I really used to get very nervous and had bad thoughts on concerts, very negative thoughts, which were attacking my brain. So
Right.
my own brain were attacking me, and that's a bad version of being nervous for sure. That's not a good way.
Right.
Fortunately, I could find a way to not to lose the excitement and some sort of nervous state, but still use it for my own, goals. Like
Right.
let's please help me. So I know you're nervous and it's good,
Right.
but please be with me, not against me.
Exactly.
It took a long time to. And of course, it's a never-ending process again. So it's not something which I have now, and
Right.
great.
And that's that. Right.
I like the idea that you are a little bit nervous, of course. And now, if I don't get nervous enough before a concert, I try to somehow make myself a little bit nervous, at least. So, because I know that for full concentration, you need something extra, something plus, which you don't have during your practice time or when you just play the piano without an audience. So I think it's an extremely important part.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. The full concentration, there's
Yeah.
an extra alertness
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
you really need to maintain.
Yeah. What I found very important about this, that you have to be very specific why you feel in such a way. So it's just not good to generalize if you're nervous. So at least what helped me is to specify that I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of
Right.
that. I have a fear of, memories, or I have fear of dying on stage, or
Right,
all
whatever it
kind
is.
of stupid, surreal thoughts has to be articulated, and I think somehow.
Maybe you can rationalize better when you realize what it is.
Totally.
And not just the actual
Yeah.
emotional feeling of what it feels like to be
Yeah,
afraid.
then there is a next step, of course, but in order to be able to make the next step, you have to know what you're facing.
What about the pressure cooker of competitions? You've done several competitions.
Well, I think generally less than people do nowadays. I've done some competitions, but I started quite late. So, for example, during my teenager years, I didn't do any competitions, for example. So the first competition I did was in 2009, and it was fun to prepare for the competition. It was an extremely big competition. It's the Geza Anda in Zurich, and it's a large repertoire, like 4 hours of music.
Wow, that's
What they
incredible.
pick from,
Right.
and the fact that it's such like from Bach till Bartók and contemporary pieces, that it's inspiring to prepare that program. Of course, I didn't pass the second round. A few years later, I did another one where I already had some success, etc. And my last competition, which helped me the most and made really sense in my professional life, was the Montreal competition. I did that when I was 30, so it's rather unusual, or I don't know if it's the good word, but I think there are more examples that someone from younger age would win a competition and then just, takes off as a soloist, and that I find pretty dangerous, and I'm quite grateful that it happened.
How do you keep the energy flow once you make it through a round and then you make it through another round? And as you get ever closer to the goal, of course, it's hard not to get more excited and more nervous.
Yeah, but there's always a short term, so there's always a next recital. Right. So this first stage, you don't think of the next stage. Of course, you have to prepare the whole
exactly
3 stages. But especially because I was already 30, I had quite a wide repertoire, and I had played those pieces, especially the piano concerto for the third stage. So I had some experience.
Right,
that was nice.
Familiarity.
That was nice, not to be totally lost.
Right,
with these
and
pieces.
Just learning
so I think the pieces themselves helped me just to
absolutely, which comes with having some experience.
Yeah.
So now that you're flying all over the world, playing concert halls everywhere, are you figuring out how to hone in on the challenge of the job, because that includes the traveling and the jet lag and the whole package? Are you finding each year that you make an adjustment on, well, now I know I can only do this many concerts in a month, or that was too much, or things like that?
Yeah, totally. I keep taking decisions and promise myself certain things not to do or to do, which sometimes I fail and I still do it.
Right.
Yeah, I think I have now certain ideas how I could imagine my life. I try to keep normality, and spend time home, and to be based somewhere, to have a strong base, to have and just to have a normal life.
Right.
Do different things outside of music and outside of playing. Well, since I also do a lot of chamber music, and especially before, for example, Montreal competition, my musical activity was more or less 100% chamber music, with some concertos and very few recitals, lots of chamber music, which I loved, and I still love it. And now it's somewhat better balanced, maybe a 50-50%.
That's great.
So also when I play, I'm not always alone,
Right.
which is a great thing. But I also, anywhere I go, I like to socialize a little bit, like to talk to people there, just look around, just get to know the place better. So this hotel life is not for me for sure. So if there's any possibility that I stay with a family or stay in private home, I always take advantage, and I'm happy to go. I have to leave the hotel.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's great because it keeps you in touch.
Yeah. And also, and it's all has to do with the fact that I generally don't like the idea of being an artist, an artist who's separate, who is isolated, who is somewhat higher, or I don't know where from other people. But just to really live a normal life and play concerts. I don't know. I mean, it's how can I say?
It's a little bit of an oxymoron.
It's a little bit of an oxymoron, but it's crazy enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
you can do it. You just have
totally.
to be.
There is this book, Thomas Mann. I love that book very much. The Tonio Kruger. It's a short story, like telling about his life, how he grows up in a little town and how he becomes an acclaimed poet, and then there is this part where he meets his friend who is a painter, and I think he speaks about another writer, and he speaks about the spring and that all this craziness. That so like an author, a writer, or anyone who is involved in art, it's enough heavy or enough crazy, or, that you have. It's really difficult to express, but you somehow obliged to belong still to normality, and not to lose everything and every connection and normal relationship with other people. But I just have a very strong feeling about that book, and I keep rereading it.
It rings true because we're supposed to be interpreting emotions and experiences of real life. So if you're separated away from it,
totally,
then you're losing a key connection that you need to be able to express.
Absolutely.
What about in your chamber music life? I saw that you went a couple summers to Marlboro, and that's such a great place where the new careers and the kind of patriarchs of the instrument families all gather together to enjoy the camaraderie and experiences of music. Was that fun for you as a young player to go in?
Oh, totally. Especially my first summer. Yeah, that was even somewhat too intense. Because it's a long time, you spend 7 weeks in the middle of nowhere. Like really the closest town is 15 miles away, but it's a very isolated situation during the whole summer. But I met a lot of very, very nice, very beautiful players. I keep in touch with most of those players who I played with there, and also that was the first time that I put myself in a context for such a long time, which was quite unknown for me.
Right.
Also, first significant experience in the States, for example.
And that's a very unique experience.
It's a very. I realized that the Atlantic actually it's pretty big.
It's a different world.
and it has its own music life, and which is somewhat different from the European one. But I mean, the end of the day, you make music together.
Right.
So
it's well put.
Great experience, and I spent there 3 summers. And then the second, the third were already lighter a little bit, but just as enjoyable as the first one.
And you knew what you were getting into, so.
Totally, and then I also realized that it's not the reality.
Right.
So that was the dangerous thing about Marlboro.
Yeah.
That it's such an idealized.
Yeah, it's like a utopia.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to do much with real life. But it's good to be dreamy for a while.
Exactly. It's a nice break from reality.
Yeah. So totally, I enjoyed very much.
My last question for you is if you had some advice to students who are now kind of going through college and leaving, is there anything that you would say, don't forget to do this, or make sure you try everything, or never say no, or say no when you should, don't always say yes, anything like that you've found to start ringing true now that you've been at it for several years?
Yeah, the first advice, never give advice. And then
followed by
other several truths. there is no recipe. Depends, of course. I mean, first of all, they have to know a little bit what they want. That's quite important.
That's good.
What they want, and they have to also ask themselves, I think, how much they love what they do. How much they love what they do, that it's not a good field for easy money or any. Gabriel Garcia Marquez says that as the definition of a writer, that you are a writer if you cannot live without writing. So this could, I think, be translated to music a little bit. So if they think that they could do something else, I think they should I'll go for it. And because it's what I see, at least in where I'm from, that there are so many frustrated and disappointed musicians around without jobs or playing in an orchestra they're not happy with, or teaching somewhere in a hidden place. And that's what you need a laugh for. I mean, if it's really not, you're not dedicated enough, then it will just give you disappointment and unhappiness, I think. So, yeah, that's not what music meant to be. Otherwise, I think read a lot, go learn as much as possible about other arts. I think that's very refreshing, quite necessary. So not just a possibility, but I think it's a need. Although I'm totally aware of the fact that music is just the most underrated art, and for an actor, I think so. For us, for musicians, it's a little more obvious that we go to theater, and we know about theater, acting, or visual art. But it's not so obvious from the other side. I don't know why is that so. Because maybe the music is the most abstract art, the most mysterious one. These kind of things.
That's perfect.
Come to mind.
Thank you so much. We're really grateful to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Check out InsideTheNotes.com for videos and more information on our guests. Follow Inside the Notes podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to receive more information on our next guests.